Before we get started with the review, I do want to make you aware that there are affiliate links in the description below, which I am compensated for when you use those links, but you still get the best possible price. Now, what we're talking about in today's video is a comparison of Deel versus Remote.com. So Deel.com versus Remote.com. Which one is the right situation for your needs if you're looking to hire internationally and be able to run payroll, HR, and be able to run essentially an international company? Now, what you can see on here is we have this kind of rundown here. We already covered the affiliate disclosure, but to be able to review these two services, what we need to do is we have to know exactly what we're comparing and how they fit together when comparing these two services. So what is global payroll? Well, that is the idea of calculating wages, tax payment withholdings and settling, and distribution pay slips. All right. So you're doing this on a global or international stage. So when you're looking at this, really what you need to know is that there are global payroll providers and then there are global payroll operations. So when it comes to just global payroll, it's paying, wages, bonuses, deductions, benefits, compliance, reporting. But with payroll operations, it's all that plus you're calculating time, dealing with taxes, setting up systems, staying up to date with the local tax laws. Both Deel.com and Remote are global payroll operations. So that is good because you're getting more functionality and features when you're looking in that direction. So the next thing you need to look at is your options for global payroll. So there's really three. You have an employer of record, which is called an EOR. You have a professional employer organization, which is called a PEO, and you're probably familiar with these, or you can go in-house. In-house is if you have an extremely large budget where you can manage attorneys, HR, all of these different things that you're going to have in-house. Most people watching this video are a little bit more savvy with their finances, so they're looking at the difference between an EOR and a PEO. Well, really, it all comes down to a legal entity. That is what you have to ask yourself. Is do you have a legal entity within the countries that you are trying to hire? Let's say you're trying to hire in Bolivia. Well, with an EOR, I have a little plus sign here. I'm going to circle this because in EOR, you do not need a legal entity. The employer of record is the legal entity that takes care of that for you. With the PEO, you're going to need to set up a legal entity in that country. Now, the reason that 99% of people are going to go with the EOR path here is because you don't want to have to deal with not only getting it set up and the costs involved with that, but the cost of maintaining it and then having to stay up to date on tax laws and changes within that country. So people are going to do an EOR. The other thing you want to consider is partner-dependent providers versus owned entity providers, okay? When you're looking at this treehouse here, and maybe this is a silly analogy, but a partner-dependent provider is like a general contractor. They're not really swinging the hammer here, right? They're hiring a roofer, they're hiring a window guy, a door guy, somebody to do the structure, maybe an electrician to come out, and they're outsourcing, subcontracting out all those services. With an owned entity provider, such as Deel or Remote, all of that is owned within the platform. So it's like you're hiring one company that is doing everything on this treehouse, and you could imagine the treehouse is going to be built faster because they can line up their different employees to get things built out. Well, when it comes to running your international payroll, you do not want to have to be waiting on an attorney that is slowing everything up in one specific spot and creating these bottlenecks. So what you want is an EOR and an owned entity provider. So that is because compliance, tech, tools, customer support, HR, payroll, legal, all of that is going to be within the Deel versus Remote.com platforms. So they're both great platforms in terms that they offer exactly this. But what it really comes down to here in green is cost. So this is where you'll see a big difference between the two platforms. Why don't we take a look at pricing on Deel.com and break it down for you? And what you can see here is they have Deel Contractor Management, $49 a month. And then Employer of Record, which we talked about, you don't need a legal entity there, is $4.99 a month for that employee. If you did have legal entities, it would be $29 per employee. But most people, again, watching this are not going to have legal entities set up in all these countries. And the nice thing about Deel as well, of course, is that you can run your US payroll through it. And then, since you most likely have a legal entity in the US, and if you want to enter into a PEO, again, that's a professional employer organization, they can handle things like HR, payroll, and benefits starting at $79 per month per employee. So here is the big difference when you go over to Remote. What you can see here is it's starting at $5.99 a month for an annual plan of employer of record. So every international employee that you have when you go the EOR route is going to cost you $100 more a month. Then contractor management is per contractor per month, $29. So again, going back to pricing here, This is just a flat $49 per month. So if you have 2 contractors, you're going to be paying more. If you have a bunch of contractors, you're going to pay substantially more with remote.com. So then when you go down here, there is the HR management, which is free. And then they have like remote talent. So the ability to reach top tier professionals, and then also contractor management plus. So when you're looking here, in my opinion, I prefer Deel.com because they also give you the options of running the US payroll and then the PEO in the US. But the biggest thing that you're going to see when you're comparing Deel.com versus Remote is that it's going to save you $100 a month per international employee with Deel. As far as like which one's more reliable, well, like I said earlier, they're both owned entity providers that provide EOR services. But Deel, which is cheaper, also works with companies such as like Shopify and Nike and huge companies so that you can be confident that they're going to meet the needs that you have for your company. All right, really quickly, I want to talk about this employee cost calculator because you're going to learn a lot about the specific countries that you're looking to hire and seeing where the costs actually break down. Now, there is a link to this calculator on the Deel website in the description below. And what I would recommend is picking your country that you want to start with. And we're actually going to do a couple because I want to show you how different it can be from country to country. So let's say we're hiring in Brazil. And again, for the sake of this video, we are hiring from the United States. I'm going to put in California. It's the most expensive state. That's why I'm using it. Maybe Hawaii is a little bit more, but it's one of the most expensive states to hire in. Now, of course, I'm not very familiar with Brazilian currency, so you may want to switch this to US dollars. Let's say it's a $75,000 position. Now, what this is going to do is not do any sort of cost of living type of calculation, like how much should I pay somebody in Brazil if I'm paying them $75,000 in California? This is actually what you're going to get right here. So what we're looking at is that gross annual salary. But when you look at total annual cost, it's a lot more expensive to hire an employee in Brazil compared to California. Again, we're not talking about cost of living. If you're paying somebody in California $75,000, you may be paying them much less in other countries just because of the cost of living. I would suggest finding a cost of living calculator online to figure out what that number is for you. But this is what I wanted to highlight right here. You're like, why is it so much more expensive, $29,000 to $8,000? Well, as you go down here, you start to see something where you're like, wait, like what's a meal voucher? $1,928. Well, that's just something that I would recommend Googling because every country is going to have different things. So what you can see here is, yes, it's very common that they offer meal voucher cards, and these vouchers are actually usable in different restaurants and grocery stores and stuff like that. So I learned that from doing this cost calculator. The interesting thing here too is like it does show with the Medicare, federal unemployment, Social Security in the US. It doesn't get into any of your costs in the US if you were offering things such as like a 401k or dental, vision, those types of benefits. So just keep that in mind. But now what you can see here is like, let's say that we change this and we decide to go to Cambodia. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep this in US dollars, calculate. Now we have a very different picture beneath this. In Cambodia, there is $190 a month of extra cost. That's because Cambodia doesn't have the same kind of requirements when you're hiring an employee within that country. Every country is different. So I highly recommend you go to this employee cost calculator so that you can figure these things out and understand exactly what you're going to be paying for beyond just their base salary, because every country is different. So again, in the description below, you'll find a link for this calculator so you can see what those costs are in the countries that you're thinking about hiring. And also we'll have links for both Remote and Deel. But in my opinion, they're both quality services, but you're going to save a lot of money when you go with Deel.com. And what we have here is a review of Deel.com, more specifically going into the back-end dashboard. What does it look like post-purchase and getting set up and managing your international payroll through a service like Deel.com? All right, I'll catch you in the next video.